Okay, let's talk about some Apple. Apple fueling the Dow, releasing its earnings for
Fire.
the fiscal third quarter, just yesterday, and owning stock in the company has never tasted so sweet, I guess, after the company did beat analyst expectations on almost every front. So joining us now for a deeper dive into the results is a roundtable. We got Matt Swider, Senior Mobile and Buying Guides Editor at Tech Radar, right next to us here on set, and Sean Awney, Editor-in-Chief at Techno Buffalo as well, joining us via Skype. It's great to have both of you. I guess, Matt, we'll start with you here. What'd you think of the quarter?
I thought it was very good, and it was very telling of what's going to happen next quarter with possibly the iPhone 8.
Okay, so and you say that because of the guidance that they gave. Many people concerned specifically that some of these shipments might be delayed because of a supply chain issue, but based on that guidance, it would seem as if some of these phones are going to go out next quarter.
Right, we'll probably at least see one iPhone by the end of September, and we think there'll be 3 total. So we could definitely see 3 because their next quarter ends on September 31st. So there's $6 billion that they're going to make next quarter versus this quarter that just ended. And where does that $6 billion come from? Probably going to be an iPhone launch.
Okay. Sean, let's bring in you as well here in terms of what you made of this quarter. Are you as optimistic maybe as Matt is here?
I'm very optimistic. I do think that we are going to see the new iPhones launching in September. Possibly the iPhone 8 may miss the end of September. We're not sure yet because we're hearing that there might be some problems with the OLED screens. But there's definitely going to be something coming from Apple, and as we all know, iPhones are always going to be a monster when they hit.
Let's talk about this revival of the iPad 2. I think that particularly catching many people off guard. And of course, we got an update to the basic iPad that came in March, and then a brand new iPad Pro that was debuted in June. We're going to bring in Sean again, joining us via Skype. In terms of what we saw with the iPad, I think the question is whether or not some of this momentum might be able to continue. Tim Cook suggesting maybe that would be the case, of course, with the new OS system coming this fall. What do you think, Sean?
I think the iPad has always been somewhat of an underestimated contender. It dominates the tablet market. We're seeing more and more schools picking them up. Tim Cook yesterday on the call was speaking that in Japan, that a huge number of the iPads sold there were the first-time iPad buyers. So it's definitely still a very viable product. Can it continue the sort of numbers we saw this quarter is still a question. But it was up 15% year over year, which it hasn't done in quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about expectations? Because with the blowout quarter, I wonder how that is impacting your and other analyst expectations on the street in terms of what's coming next quarter. Obviously, everybody is anticipating an iPhone release to drive that incremental revenue and cash flow, but is that baked into the stock today? And did anything change based on what we saw from earnings yesterday in terms of accelerating expectations into the quarter that could put Apple up against some tough comps or tough expectation set as they move into the next quarter?
Well, I think it generally wasn't a surprise, so it may already be baked into people's views and their expectations of Apple, just because the working theory was it is coming in September. Yes, there were fears of delays about the iPhone 8, but I think the majority of people expect an iPhone every year, at least since the iPhone 5, it's launched in September.
But clearly the market was not expecting the kind of quarter that it got from Apple. Just, the stock was up, what was it? It was somewhere between 3 and 5%. I don't know where it is right now. That is a huge move for a stock at this scale. So up 5%. That's what I thought. So Apple was, outperformed even what the street's expecting. Do you think they'll be able to continue to deliver at that pace? And in addition to the iPhone launch, the other thing I was looking at is China. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's been a disappointing area. And how important is China for them to be able to continue to sort of outperform street expectations, or is the core business just so strong that they have ways to run?
I think when it comes to China, they're making inroads by making themselves available to the Chinese government. They took down the VPNs,
right,
which is a disappointment for a lot of people. But at the same time, it'll give them leverage in China, which is something they desperately need in addition to India.
For sure.
So they need those two things. I think with the rise in stock, that could be tied to other areas in addition to the iPad or the iPhone. The iPad, for example, the fact that did better than expected. Everybody expected that to not rebound, but that's becoming people's personal computer in a lot of ways, more and more. And exactly with the iOS 11 update, it is almost, it's nearly a computer for most.
Especially the larger format
Exactly,
iPhones.
the 10.5 inch and the 12.9.
Sean, let's bring in you as well and talk about Macs, because we know in addition to the iPad, which we've hit on here, Mac also driving some of these results that we just got, of course, yesterday evening. In terms of the Mac, right, put this in perspective, those sales up 7%, third straight quarter of gains, but it comes at a time when the PC market is not so hot. And so how do you look at Macs maybe versus what else is going on, broader industry trends?
The Mac really was somewhat of a surprise to me. There was a lot of negativity surrounding the latest release of the MacBook Pro, especially since they've gone to all USB-C connectors, and we're not quite there with all of our peripherals yet, so you're having to buy dongles and everything else. So it seemed like maybe the Mac sales weren't going to be as high as they were. They definitely were healthy. They beat expectations. They were up over last year. As for how it's doing compared to the rest of the market, it's interesting. Why is Apple bucking this trend? And honestly, I don't have an answer for you. It's unexpected, but everything yesterday seemed to be unexpected.
As a MacBook Pro, a new MacBook Pro owner, I have to agree. I mean, I was somewhat underwhelmed by the device personally, so it was surprising to see, especially in light of the gains that Microsoft has been making under Satya Nadella over the past couple of years. What are you guys seeing, not to change topic, but as a corollary to what we're seeing from Apple? Are you guys still bullish on Microsoft? Do you think that we have sort of an emergent, or not emergent, but a cementing duopoly in the space for these personal computing devices? Or do you think this will take a chunk or a bite out of Microsoft's momentum?
I think you do see a duopoly, especially because Microsoft has been getting into hardware over the years, and they're doing very well. The narrative is that they are a major player these days, and 4 or 5 years ago they were cast out from being one of the top companies that you would rely on for your computing needs, and now they're back, and they are taking on Apple in ways that we didn't expect.
I guess the interesting thing here, though, is that the market is growing so tremendously on a global basis that there's room for both Apple and Microsoft to benefit tremendously and to outperform, as we saw yesterday with Apple.
Right now, it's not a zero-sum game because there's new markets that they're tapping into, so there's room for both businesses to grow.
Sean, let's bring you in as well here. A lot of people wondering, or questioning rather, to the extent how much Tim Cook can innovate and how he's leading this company. And so based on this quarter, even though we might not have seen any major innovation, what does this tell you about Tim Cook? Does it change your opinion, or you think, at least based on your reporting, right, the opinion of Tim Cook out there?
I think the opinion of Tim Cook is improving. Something that we have to remember is that Tim was handpicked by Steve, and Jobs was definitely not someone that just would randomly crown somebody to be the new king of Apple without having given it a lot of thought. Tim had a lot to overcome. I think he's doing a heck of a job. Yes, we're not seeing as much innovation as we had hoped, but clearly he's doing something right, but can the momentum carry? That's the whole thing. People look to Apple for innovation, and if there isn't a lot of innovation coming, that's going to start to wear on him. But something tells me he's got a trick up his sleeve that we haven't seen yet.
What do you think, Matt?
I think he could have a one more thing. I think especially augmented reality is going to be a big thing for Apple in terms of new surprises and new innovations. You had Gene Munster on here back in March, and he talked about some examples of augmented reality that were really inspiring. He was a former Apple analyst, and he talked about finding your seat at a sports game, if you're going to a baseball game, by looking through your phone and how your phone is going to disappear. So I think Apple has a lot more momentum in them, and Tim Cook has some innovation that he could unveil at the end of his conferences with those one more thing.
I mean, what we're certainly seeing, though, from Apple and from Tim Cook specifically is relentless execution, which is clearly what we knew we were getting at a base level with Tim. And I think why Steve Jobs picked him in the first place was because he was known to be
sophisticated operator. He's built a sophisticated, world-renowned supply chain, right, which caused many to question why maybe, based on what Trump said, that Apple would actually be opening 3 new plants here in the U.S.
Exactly. And so while it may be on the growth side where folks are wondering whether they'll be able to continue this growth without new product releases, and not just in existing categories, but perhaps a new whiz-bang sort of product or application from Apple. I think what we are seeing is an incredible work from him on the ops side, on the supply chain side, and the amount of cash flow this company generates is ridiculous. So, even if iPhone releases per annum, continued improvements of the existing lines, with streamlined ops and cash flow, that's a pretty good stock for the near term, and then innovation is obviously a more medium to long-term phenomenon with a company like this.
And it's sometimes seen as the boring job that he has, where he's not coming out with that new whiz-bang product all the time. They're late to the Apple Watch, for example, when other competitors had watches. Google had a watch a year prior. But they catch up and they do it eventually, and now they own 50% of the watch market with Apple Watch. So they're definitely doing it slow but steady.
Sean, do you think a tax holiday is priced into this stock at all? And of course, we know the stock at an all-time high today. The market's overall at an all-time high today. The Dow being fueled by Apple. Of course, $200+ billion could come back to the U.S. for Apple if this tax holiday does happen. How much do you think that is baked into the stock right now, if at all?
I think it is baked in. We all know that they're sitting on this massive war chest, and the majority of it is offshore. If that ever does come flowing back in, it's going to be amazing for the company. I think there's more than the tax holiday as to why they sit on it. There's a lot of outside of the U.S. companies that they could be purchasing that they're not. But I do feel that the $261.5 billion that they're sitting on is definitely baked into the value of the stock.
It can't be fully baked in, though, because there has to be uncertainty there as to whether it's going to happen. So I would just say that to the extent that there's a full repatriation, that should give the stock a proper bump, because I'm just, given the instability of the current administration, I'd imagine that Wall Street is taking a pretty heavy discount on that repatriation. But you're right. I mean, some of it is certainly baked in. I'd be hard-pressed to imagine that all of it is at this point.
What do you think, Matt?
Absolutely. Just because of the current climate, the political climate, we may or may not see that actually happen. But, if it does happen and everything goes according to plan, that is great for innovation in terms of, just for Apple and the country in terms of jobs.
Mm-hmm. In terms of acquisitions, you think any are on the horizon? What would be one that might make sense for Apple?
Apple a lot of times does smaller acquisitions. So while we may want them to go after Fitbit to consolidate that market and become an actual leader in fitness tracking, a lot of those are just pipe dreams for a lot of people. So they usually do, companies that you haven't heard of, like when they bought the company behind Siri or bought the technology behind it. Those are the acquisitions they go after that are not household names. So we may see augmented reality and AI acquisitions down, in the next 2 years.
All right, Matt Swider, Senior Mobile and Buying Guides Editor at Tech Radar, and Sean Aune, Editor-in-Chief and Director of Operations at Techno Buffalo. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys.
Thank
okay,
you.
Let's get a check on the Dow, hitting that 22,000 mark at the open today.
Some of the gains coming back here, though.
Coming in a little bit, but still, I mean, we're circling around 22. The stock market's been on an absolute tear. I was reading recently that there has been a pullback in the U.S. dollar recently, largely due to the instability and some of the comments even that Trump has made about the dollar, which could be fueling the move into equities as well. So interesting to see how the currency and the equity markets are sort of balancing each other right now. But unprecedented strength in the stock market. That is at least something that DJT can hang his hat on right now, and certainly everyone on the floor is. He's a man who knows how to claim credit for things that are happening that are good on his watch and try and avoid taking credit for those that are not good.
All right, well, speaking of Trump, coming up, international travel in the Trump era. The effects it's having on tourism in the U.S. up next.